As I mentioned, the next group, we have two groups of teachers. So this is the first group. Again, we really appreciate you coming here and speaking to this group. I would just ask, if you're doing written testimony, we'll get that testimony. We just summarize your ideas or the main points you want to come across instead of reading your testimony verbatim on your sheets. Thank you. And then lastly, I guess we'll start, if you don't mind, Phil, starting on the right, just introduce yourself, where you're from, and then go at it. Thanks.
Good evening. First, I want to thank you all for having this forum. It's nice to have the opportunity to have voices of teachers and parents heard. I'll introduce myself. My name is Phil Cleary. I'm a teacher in the Syracuse Central School District. For the last 23 years, I've been a full-time special education teacher at the North Syracuse Education Program on Main Street. Over a 44-time program serving children with disabilities alongside the teachers. In terms of the introduction as well, I want to introduce myself to say, like most of my colleagues sitting behind me, I have an undergraduate degree, a graduate degree, numerous postgraduate hours, and ongoing professional development. In 2009, I was honored as the Teacher of the Year in my district, and I say that not to sound like I'm a really great guy, but to say that I am very average. I'm a regular teacher, just like all these people sitting behind me. I love being a teacher. I love going to school every day. My kids in my classroom are tremendous. I have wonderful parents and fantastic colleagues. And what I want to do every day when I get up is do a good job. Because public education is the best opportunity our kids have, from wherever they come from. It is a great equalizer. So tonight I just want to touch on a couple of topics. I want to thank the speakers who came before, who did a tremendous job providing data. I do want to touch on a few points. Common Core, testing, APPR, which we call it the teacher evaluation system, and a little bit about how we got here. First, Common Core, and I want to be very clear, I'm speaking for myself as a practicing teacher, proud public school graduate. If somebody came to me and they said, should there be a national and state plan for how we educate kids? Should there be a roadmap that says, when you're in first grade, you're going to learn this. When you're in fifth grade, you're going to learn that. When you're in high school English in ninth grade, you're going to learn that. And if you went from place to place, school to school, district to district, and state to state, you probably have the same things. You have a level of portability and consistency in education and in curriculum. I'd say, yeah, that's a great idea. Why haven't we been doing that all along? You know, certainly local schools, local communities want some control over making things something that reflects their community. And certainly teachers should be allowed the opportunity to balance art and science to know what to teach to their kids in a particular way to make it meaningful for them so they're successful. But I have to say, and as a preschool teacher, I get to look at this a bit from afar. And if I have to explain it to people, which because of all the things going on, I have to do a lot, it makes it sound like we're either unorganized or stupid or both. Because when we talk about Common Core as it stands today, it sounds like we don't know what the heck we're doing. If we have ideas to push people in a certain direction, we don't have a roadmap. And we have issues for people to jump through with no support and no resources. And let me tell you, teachers tend to be fairly quiet people to the outside, but among us, they're some of the most tenacious and competitive people you'll ever meet. They want to do a great job. They want to know what the other person's doing down the hall because if it's a good idea, they want to beg, borrow, and steal. And when we feel that we're not getting the support we need to do the job we want to do, we're ticked. because we want to do a great job. And as it stands right now, it's a sad, sad thing to have something called Common Core and have it be so weak and so useless to us that we want to throw it all away. Because the basics of having an organized system is a good thing. Second, I want to talk about testing. And yes, I want to thank the speaker who came before me who talked about Pearson, because I'll tell you what, testing was not invented by Pearson. It was invented by teachers. And testing is a good thing. Teachers invented it. We need testing. We need it every day in our own way. Because even for my tiny kids who are 3 and 4 years old, up to the kids who are in high school and beyond, teachers want to know what their kids know. They want to know what they've learned, and if they find gaps or missing pieces, they want to know immediately to inform their practice and help their students now. Not a month from now, not next year when the kids are out of their classes. They want their testing to help them now. We don't need a company to do it for us and provide data for data's sake. We want data for our needs to help our kids. So I feel that testing should be for a real purpose. If it's testing for testing's sake, that's bad. If it's testing for the purpose of providing a score for me, or for my school, or for my district, or for my state, that's a little crap. Because testing is there to help kids. So I stand proudly to say that I really believe that we should put the brakes on that. We should get a moratorium on testing until there's a good reason for it. And if we can't and now on to teacher evaluation. I love teacher evaluation when it's done right. Today actually was the beginning of my evaluation cycle. I prepared for it for a few weeks. I met with my school administrator, who works very hard, and I did my announced observation today. I love having people in my classroom. I love having my administrator in my classroom. I want my parents in my classroom. I want my colleagues in my classroom. I want people from the community. I want you guys in my classroom, because you know what? Every single day, in every single classroom, in every single district in New York State, all 700 plus districts, great things happen in school every day. And everybody needs to know. So, when I go to meet with my administrator later this week to talk about how my observation went, well, I think I did a great job. But guess what? My administrator is pretty good at this, and she probably saw some things that I might have missed, or I could add, or what could make me better. I appreciate that, because just because I've been doing this for 22, 23 years, it doesn't mean I'm always going to be knowing the best thing at the right time. And if I think I know everything, then I'm really wrong. I need somebody to come in, and I need the help of my colleagues and my administrators to help me get better every day. Because I want to improve from the first day I walked in the door of my school until the day I retire. I want to be good at it. So, also for teacher evaluation, again, it has to be for a good reason. If it's a score that, again, is there for me, or my school, or my district, or my state, that doesn't help our kids. And when it's done in a way that doesn't consider the different kinds of kids that walk through our doors and the different needs they have, that don't address really the biggest problem we have, and that's poverty. You're going to hang a teacher because the kids they teach are poor, or they speak a second language, or they have a disability? Really? So, how did we get here? First, I want to say that we didn't get here in a minute. We didn't get here in a month or a year. We got here over a long time. And as glad as I am to be here today and see you all here today, I think this conversation has been about, well, more overdue than the time I've been teaching. Because right now, everybody's talking about education, and they're talking about why it's going well and why it's not. And we've never had that level of public discourse in education. It's always been flinging things in public schools waiting for us to take us, and that's wrong. So first, I want to talk about Commissioner King. I want to thank him. I want to thank him because his adherence to the things that he believes have raised the level of public discourse on education to a level that has never been in my lifetime. And I appreciate that. I disagree with him, but I appreciate that the conversation keeps on going until my neighbors and the people down the street, the people I bump into in Wegmans, have some idea of what we're doing, what we're dealing with. That's a really great thing. The fact that you guys are noticing makes it even better. Now, people wonder, where did John King come from? Well, he got hired by the Board of Regents. And I disagree with them sometimes. And I wonder who hired them. You guys did. And who hires you guys? We do. So I'm not trying to be pissy, but I think it bears saying. I think that we've reached a point in time where we should be honest enough to talk about common sense instead of common core. We should talk about what's right in our schools, because New York is a great state. We have great schools and great teachers, wonderful kids, and fantastic parents. And just like in every classroom you were in, who got all the attention? The bad kids. The kids who weren't doing what they're supposed to do. Who did get a lot of attention? All the people who were doing a great job. All the kids who were working hard, doing their homework, working with their parents, working with their teachers. And what kind of teachers should get the attention? Well, the vast, vast, vast majority of us who are busting our humps every day. And we are thankful for this opportunity to be here today, to partner with the parents with whom we could not do our jobs, and with you, so that the level of public discourse about public education is not just here today, but here to stay. Thank you very much.
It's always hard to follow Phil. I'm sure a lot of you know him as a PAC member. My name is Beth Chetney, and I've got many hats on here today. I'm a parent and I'm a teacher. I teach here in Baldwinsville. I'm a taxpayer. I live here in Baldwinsville. And I'm also the union president of the Baldwinsville Teachers Association. So I have a few things to say about each one of those things. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here. I was very encouraged that you use our little place here in Baldwinsville to come from all parts of the state, and I appreciate your commitment as members of this education committee to actually hear from people that live this life every day. And I'm sure you're hearing a lot from a lot of people, and I appreciate your willingness to take a lot of your evening away to hear that. I truly thank you. First, as a parent, my son is a 9-year-old, and he goes to Reynolds, which is an elementary school here. He's in 4th grade. I'm one of the lucky ones because he's doing very well. He doesn't have a learning disability. He's kind of a pain in the butt sometimes, but he's a natural student, and he does well in spite of everything. He has a great teacher who's not afraid to challenge him, not afraid to teach her class, not afraid to evaluate, as my colleague Phil said. Not afraid to adjust her teaching when her teaching is not going quite well. She holds him accountable. And I gotta say though, I cringe when, not by her choice I'm sure, but by internal and external pressures, she has to send home one of those darn Pearson homework assignments that I, as also with a undergraduate degree, graduate degree in education beyond my master's degree, I have to occasionally Google the answers because I don't know how to put a 100-chip die to add, 13 times 7 and multiply by 10s when we learn just add the 0 when you multiply the two numbers together and you're fine. So that's very frustrating as an educator that I have to Google answers for my 4th grader. It's kind of embarrassing. I also, about the test for him, he did well on the tests, but I knew the tests were a lie. The tests didn't say that he plays piano, and he plays baseball, and he plays basketball, and he loves recess, and that he's helpful, and that he's kind, and that he likes to use the smartboard, and he likes to help the teacher with the lunch count. The test didn't say that. And I actually, considering the position that I hold, you would think that I would be someone that would be talking about this at home all the time. My husband's also a teacher, and we try to keep that away. I actually lied to my son and told him it was a test to see if he could sit still for 6 days. So that was how I got through that, was just do your best, sit still, answer questions as best you can. He came out all right. But I get offended as a parent, and I'm sure some other parents in the room behind me were offended that our education secretary said that we white suburban mothers. Our kids are not as good as we think they are. And my son and his classmates and the parents in this room and the teachers in this room don't need to be kicked in the gut by someone who is supposed to stand for education for our entire country to have us be motivated. I think that is the absolute opposite of motivation. In fact, if I had done that as a teacher and talked about my students that way, I'd probably be on the front page of the newspaper like he is, and I probably would be standing in front of my superintendent or my human resources director because I'd be in a bit of a jam. I don't think they're in the room anymore. As a teacher, I like Phil, I see the value of standards, and our district has I think, done a nice job overall of setting local standards that have high achievement expectations for our kids. And we've attempted to work with the district and parents and communication at all levels in order to evaluate teachers on these standards. Our district, we've had lots of quality teachers come through here. We've been trained in differentiated instruction, lesson design, cooperative learning, co-teaching, questioning, critical thinking, CRISP, being independent learners, ITIP. We've had them all, and they're all valuable as teachers, and we want to use those tools in our toolkit. We want to use testing, and standards are great for that, so that I can say that a student's going to be able to write no matter whether he's here, whether he's in Florida, whether he's in Tennessee, he can write, cogently, coherently. But all this professional development is called into questions by these people that are in charge of the state education department. The regents, Merrill Tisch, Dr. King, who have virtually no educational experience, if none at all. And I find that offensive as a teacher. My husband calls it a cake chase, where when I used to go to Bunko, and all it was playing the dice game until you could get the cake at the end. That's how I feel like we've done this with our money. And teachers have had to chase these test scores because of this intrinsic and extrinsic motivation to do well and be competitive, as my colleague said. The Common Core, as we know, ignores poverty. It ignores the experts in the classroom. It ignores parents. It ignores that the corporations and billionaires that are giving this money to Common Core are taking their money out of their left pocket. They're putting it over here and saying, we're going to donate this money to you. Then that money goes and buys this stuff over here, of which these billionaires and corporations are stockholders, and they put that money back in there and get the tax break as well. But they need to be seen as these altruistic people who are giving their billions and billions of dollars to education, and they're receiving in return their investments in the guys in technology, textbooks, data mining, charter schools that don't have to answer the same standards and population as public school. From a personal teaching point of view, and I'm going to talk fast because I know we have more people, I teach 9th grade English, and the Common Core is telling me that my curriculum should be 70% nonfiction text, informational text, and 30% fiction. Now, I don't know about you, but I learned some of my greatest lessons from Laura Ingalls Wilder, and Judy Blume, and Atticus Finch, and William Shakespeare, and my colleagues that I visited. If you looked at some of the books that are on this list, and I know my colleagues in social studies and technology and art and science, they are using the nonfiction text. And that is great, and they're doing a great job. And so are my colleagues in the English language arts. But to have 3 of my 10 texts, whether they're short or long, only 3 of them are fiction, only 3 of them are literature. If you have children or grandchildren, if you have kids you were talking about that don't have the opportunity, their parents are worried about a roof over their head, and they don't have the opportunity to sit down and read to their kids at night a storybook and the caterpillar, because they're busy working 3 jobs to be able to feed their kids. So that's offensive to me. The modules, I'm not going to lie, I look at the modules, I I've checked out a few things. There's a few things in the module, but there's also a few things on the web, and there's also a few things in a trade book, and there's also a few things in my next door neighbor's classroom. It should be used just as something as a guide. So I think it is a lie that Commissioner King, when he says the modules, as one of the earlier speakers said, should be adopted, adapted, or ignored. Yet on his New York State Council of Superintendents Conference this past year in Albany or Saratoga, one of the slides said that the superintendent, you can find this online, you can find a slideshow from there, that superintendents ask yourself, are you evaluating your teachers on how much professional development you as a district are giving based on the website Engage New York? Well, guess where the modules are? Anyone? Engage New York. So don't tell me that I can adapt, or ignore, and then tell me that my superintendent is being told that she has to assess whether I'm using that as a professional development site. So it's a lie. It's a lie. And so is my rotation. As a union president, I have the unfortunate job of having to sit with a lot of teachers just because they're stressed, just because they are, I don't know what to do. My gut tells me that when I learned in psychology that I got to pour the little glass into the tall glass, and the kids are going to guess the tall glass has more water because they work, concretely, but they're being told to work abstractly, and they're telling me I can't in good conscience do this, but I know my test scores are going to hurt my school or hurt me, and it might be on the test, and what do? And they're stressed. They're freaking out. They know the development on a lot of levels, to answer your question, some of it, that they're inappropriate at places, and they do their best to adjust them the best they can, but they don't want to be insubordinate, because that's the other job that I hold. Now, has anyone gotten in trouble in my district for the not following the Common Core? Absolutely not. So I know that's going to be your question next, is whether I've had that issue, and I have not. So far, our district is taking it marginally slow, with a couple of exceptions we can talk about privately. I also enjoy being evaluated, but there's not a lot of teachers out there that are as confident as Phil. When we get evaluated by our bosses, you're nervous. It's hard, it's scary, but then to have on top of that the pressure of the fact that I have a student who's truant and isn't going to come to my room and still going to get a 0, and that's going to be counted against me, and I've done what I can to engage him or engage her. To have a cadre of tests that have not been appropriately researched, nor referenced, or even shared with parents and teachers after the test is educationally inappropriate, and it's an educationally inappropriate way to evaluate a teacher's effectiveness and student performance. SED has committed a grave injustice to our children, our teachers, and our administration, and I have 3 basic recommendations. Number 1, I would hope that you would stand with the 3-year moratorium request of high-stake testing consequences for students and teachers. We need to slow this down. We need to ban, that means gone, ban pre-K through 2 testing. And finally, we need to allow the actual practitioners, not people who have their Harvard law degrees and their educational, whatever those private schools out there that they might have run for a couple years before they sought, bigger and better things. Instead of letting them make the decisions, let the practitioners at the local level make the decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Your willingness to hold a forum in this manner gives New York educators a small glimmer of hope that our concerns will not be brushed off as those of, quote, special interest groups, or as those of, quote, white suburban moms who all of a sudden their child isn't as brilliant as they thought they were, and their school isn't quite as good as they thought they were.
I'm sorry, could you just introduce yourself and where you're from?
It's coming. Quite frankly, many of us have very grave concerns, and it seems that no one is listening. My name is Sean Redmore. I'm a graduate of this Baldwinsville School District. I was hired in 1988 as a 6th grade teacher in this district, so I'm a 25-year veteran educator. Additionally, I have 3 children of my own, one a 2012 graduate from Baldwinsville, and the other 2 currently enrolled in school here. In all fairness, I do, in fact, have special interests in the performance of this district, and I could be characterized as a white suburban mom. But please don't let that minimize the seriousness of the concerns of my fellow educators and me. I'll try to keep this concise, specifically regarding the New York State testing. My first concern, over-reliance on unreliable and error-filled state tests. A change in difficulty level from year to year and from grade level to grade level. These are not high-quality norm reference tests that give us a true measure of how our students are performing, especially in comparison to students their own age in other schools and or other states that have adopted the Common Core state standards. Along with these tests come the directions from New York State Ed that there is no opt-out option for parents who don't agree with the administration of these annual exams in grades 3 through 8. The second concern, the amount of valuable instruction time that is missed with administration and scoring of these tests. Why is it that our youngest students must sit through 6 days, 540 minutes of state testing in math and English language arts every year, when our high school Regent students only need 4 hours in one day to demonstrate their mastery level of the material that has been taught? Our students in grades 3 through 8 sit longer in testing situations than college-bound hopefuls sit for the SAT, or graduates sit for the bar exam. Once these tests are administered, the educators are then pulled out of our classrooms for days to score these exams, missing even more instructional time with our students. My third concern, using our students as guinea pigs and having the state dictate to us when we must miss even more instructional time to administer their field tests in our schools, just so that Pearson can get a more reliable bank of test questions. There are psychometricians that are hired to do just this work, and it would not involve taking even more instructional time away from New York students. This state and Pearson are relying on a captive audience, our schools, teachers, and students, to experiment with creating tests that may be an effective measure of students in the future. Tell me, if this is acceptable to do to our students in grades 3 through 8, then why isn't it acceptable to do experimental drug testing on another equally captive audience, people incarcerated in our corrections system? They're not guinea pigs. My last concern, data mining information on our children by Ingram. This system contains names, attendance records, disciplinary histories, addresses, test scores, and information on our students' learning disabilities, all in one convenient location. Coupled with guarantees about the security of this national database and promises that this information will not be sold or shared, parents and teachers are told that we are not allowed to opt out of this new program. Honestly, the number of concerns that I have about Common Core standards and the New York State testing program cannot be done justice in just 3 minutes I have to speak to you. Personally, it's giving me flashbacks to Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall. I've been able to take control in only one small area regarding the concerns I have as an educator, and that is, I refuse to let my own children be a part of the farce that is happening in our state right now. Do not tell me that I cannot opt out as a parent, because it is my constitutional right to refuse to allow my children to be used as guinea pigs. Now, imagine me, a 25-year educator, going to work every day in a profession that I adore, and struggling with the hypocrisy of refusing to allow my own children to be used this way, but having to keep my mouth shut and follow the directions of our, quote, educational leaders as I submit my fellow community members' children to this travesty. Please tell me that there is someone out there listening to our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity tonight. My name is Amy Jones, and I'm offering this testimony as a union officer of the Mexican Academy and Central Schools Faculty Association, a teacher currently at 5th grade with close to 20 years of teaching experience, and a parent of a 5th and 8th grader attending public schools. I'll try and move away from reading my testimony. I'd be remiss being from Mexico and not mentioning the plane being built to the sky. I would never allow my child to board a plane I thought might crash. I think none of us would. Yet every morning I put her on that bus, and she cries every night. And we heard that we've gone to integrity from fidelity, the initial directive from state ed. But she doesn't think like that. Someone needs to explain that to her. I'm proud to be from the district where I teach, where we didn't adopt the modules with fidelity, even though our test scores were totally separate because of it. My goal tonight was to speak about testing. It's not new in New York State, and we have not held it in high regard as practitioners for quite a while. It has gotten worse, with New York being one of the first states to connect standardized testing to the Common Core, and then link it to the teacher evaluation system. Why do we need to be first? We have witnessed over the past several years longer tests. I'm not allowed to speak too much that I know about the tests to you because I signed my license away when I administered them, that I would not share anything I saw on the test. I don't want to lose my license, so I have referenced a letter the principals have written explaining some of the specifics that they have seen in the testing. I place no value in the scores of my own 2 children, knowing that neither was able to complete any of the days of testing in their allotted time, and not knowing how much time they spent on questions that did not count towards their score, but helped Pearson. I can also share firsthand that tests produced a high amount of anxiety among my own children and those that I teach. I had to administer those tests to students who get double time for their IEP. Take their numbers, double them. Our entire building has to shut down so that those students are afforded the opportunity to finish their tests and setting the research testing. A lot more minutes than 1% of the school year. Teachers are worried about their APPR scores and how it reflects on them. Administrators are worried that if they use the local control portion, the rubric, that they know gives their teachers good feedback, yet the state scores come back ineffective, principals are wondering how that's going to reflect on them and they should be using the rubric in a different way. Teachers are spending a great deal of time teaching strategies for test taking at the expense of quality lessons, and students are very aware of the pressures on all parties. Great teachers are leaving the profession, and children are feeling like failures due to the scores they receive in these tests. A personal example is my own daughter, who scored perfect math and ELA scores one year with a teacher highly versed in test-taking strategies. The following year, my daughter's scores went down a few points, although still within the range for a 4, with a brand new teacher spending a great deal of instruction time on inquiry and projects, college and career readiness. My daughter and her new highly motivated teacher would both be considered failures with the current growth model. It is a model that is failing us all. I have serious questions about the validity of the testing and the costly consequences imposed on districts not meeting standards. I wonder how a school in my district just recently was designated a lab school based on the subgroup of low socioeconomic students for their performance on the now outdated spring 2012 math and ELA test results. Who determined this and how? How much funding is being provided to help these lab schools? And shouldn't the conversation for this subgroup of low socioeconomic students revolve around the subject of poverty and not around test scores? I would like to share a few points from the principal's letter. Things you know, it can be documented in the testimony. New York State has increased testing dramatically. The tests were too long. Ambiguous questions appeared throughout the exams. I'll refer back to the pineapple story that made the media last year. that reflects the quality. Children have reacted to the tests in many ways. We have seen them in tears, we have seen them sick. The low passing rate was predicted for these baseline tests. The college readiness benchmark is irresponsibly inflated. When we look at the numbers that were used, we're expecting more than probably we should for college and career readiness. Students are labeled as failures, and then they do not get exposure to classes that would actually enrich them. The achievement gap is widening. The tests are putting a financial strain on schools, and the tests are threatening other quality state initiatives. Here's what we don't know. How do these tests help our students? How to use these tests to improve student skills or understanding? We don't get the results, but we still have the students. They've moved on. The underlying cause of low test scores is unknown. It's probably poverty. What do we expect this year or next year? They're going to change the tests. They're going to change the cut scores. If governor and commissioner would like to show that we've been successful with these modules, they will change the cut scores to indicate just so. And if they'd like to prove we've been unsuccessful, they will set the cut scores that way. We have no control over that in our relationship.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. Thank you for doing something that the governor should have done long ago. Ask teachers for some input. My name is Bill Cahill. I've been a teacher for 15 years. For the past 13 years, I've taught the Fulton City School District. I've taught 3rd grade, 5th grade, inclusion, and for the last 12 years, 6th grade. I've tied a few shoes, wiped many noses, and dried a few tears in those years. I'm also the father of a 7th grade dog. I work with little human beings. They're called children, and I've never met two that are alike or the same. Addressing concerns that I have for, for what government's doing in a concise statement is no small task. I'll do my best to be brief. I would like, the biggest question I get from moms and dads is, how do we get here? And it's complex, but there's definitely dots to trace. So I'd like to provide a little more detail on what some of my colleagues added about the history of how we got here, and then I'll have some very specific examples or recommendations. The beginning of modern school reform goes back 30 years to the federal government's A Nation at Risk report published in 1983. It was written during a recession when Japanese auto manufacturers were starting to knock at the door of America's domination of that industry. Workers were losing jobs, and education was an easy scapegoat. There was another report by academic scholars in 1983 that came to the exact opposite conclusions of The Nation at Risk, but it was ignored because it did not fit the political agenda at the time. Speaking of political agendas, remember, you cannot have reform without a crisis. Now let's fast forward to the 21st century. No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, and Common Core. Every day as a classroom teacher, I am beat over the head in terms of data and evidence. So let me give you a little data and evidence about some of the people who are the driving force behind what our children do in schools every day. At the top, we have Bill Gates, an intelligent man to be respected at many levels. I would trust him to set me up on a server, and certainly trust him to manage my 401k. But at a loss to grasp his expertise in educating children in public schools. In 2007, he contributed $60 million to be split between both political parties' presidential campaigns for their support of his foundation's educational reforms. At the time, it was the largest financial contribution to presidential campaigns. The educational issues discussed in the 2008 campaign were dictated by money, not the needs of our children. Remember the lesson of Watergate. Follow the money. How confident is Bill Gates about his reforms that are closing schools, firing teachers, and demoralizing children? In an interview this past September, you can watch it on YouTube and you can take his tone for what you think it is. He very nonchalantly stated, and I quote, "It will be a decade before we know if the changes implemented worked." So I want you to remind Mr. Gates that our children's education should not be gambled with like a cheap stock or bond. President Obama was elected in 2008 and appointed Art Duncan as Secretary of Education in 2009. The Before his appointment, Mr. Duncan was the CEO of Chicago Public Schools. The data and evidence from his 8-year tenure show him to be a failure, unless you consider closing public schools and replacing them with charter schools a success. Did I mention he was the CEO of Chicago Public Schools? If you would like some insight to his feelings on people that are providing pushback about us here today, you can refer to his comments that he made this past Friday. So off to Washington, Mr. Duncan goes, with 5 of his first appointees to the Department of Ed are top people from the Gates Foundation, including his first Chief of Staff, Margot Rogers. His second Chief of Staff came from the Gates Foundation as well. Just a tidbit for my fellow educators in the room tonight. Our current evaluation system, the one that ranks me, a developing teacher, after a dozen years of highly effective evaluations, is modeled after the Microsoft stack ranking model. In a survey of Microsoft employees, this evaluation model is what they hate most about working for Microsoft. Driving reform closer to home, we have Governor Cuomo. His language is frightening. When discussing failing schools this past August, he said those schools should receive a death penalty. Truly disgusting language in light of so many recent school tragedies. The evidence shows he wants to hold teachers solely accountable for student achievement, even if it means asking our youngest students to run before they can walk. Last but not least, we have the Governor's Commissioner of Education, John King, or the amazing Preston, as I like to call him. I'm dating myself, but I kind of already know. The data and evidence shows the man put in charge of our state's public education system has 3 years of teaching experience in private schools. I read that his children attend private school in Albany, which is his right as a parent. He must be waiting for the rigor to kick in before he enrolls them in our public schools. It's a quick example of the rigor that everyone likes to talk about. I attended a Singapore math workshop last fall. About 50 educators in the room. Every one of us had a master's degree. We're having great difficulty doing mathematics that require the algorithms that have been widely accepted for hundreds of years around the world. And one problem came up and no one could seem to get the answer. So I stood up to be sure and I asked, does anybody have the answer to this problem? No one was even close. 50 adults, all master's degree. No one's got a clue how to do this. I asked the presenter, who was very good by the way, are our students going to be expected to do this level of problems? She said, absolutely, they will be. If I didn't have major concerns before that, and I did, that day was certainly a red flag for me. The conditions the architects of reform have put our children in have been questioned by thousands of teachers, thousands of principals and superintendents, dozens and dozens of scholars and experts in child development, and yet they stay the course. They cling to this sham the states adopted with a financial gun to their heads before they were ever written. That a person in this room buys a car or a snowboard without kicking the tires first. But the Common Core was adopted without actual teachers ever having a look at it. Now we are asked to lead our students with scripted modules rather than creativity and ingenuity. What I am positive of is the modules being used in schools, if they were created by teachers, what we were seeing with them today would never be tolerated. If my administrator asked me, hey, how'd that formative assessment go on ratios the other day? And my response was, well, none of my students passed it. It would not be tolerated. If the daily formative assessment at the end of one of my lessons was not taught during my lesson, I'd be in trouble, and rightfully so. But it's not a problem with the modules. We're told, keep going, stay on schedule. Why? Because we need the state's money. But supposedly, the state standards are higher than classroom teachers. What a farce. Race to the top, they call it. If we stay on this course, there will surely be a crawl to the bottom for our children. So where does this little history lesson lead us? As a teacher, what is it that I want? What is it that we need to do? It's a long list. Here's an abbreviated version. Let's take the good in the Common Core, and there is some good. Let's bring back enrichment programs and push our students that are ready to be pushed. Those students have special needs too. If government wants to truly help children, take the money we're paying Pearson and offer parents to bring their kids to school ready for kindergarten a $5,000 tax stipend. If we're going to test children, acknowledge that all children are not going to reach a specific mastery level. Acknowledge there is no such thing as like children. Acknowledge that regardless of who the president is or the education commissioner is, human test results will always fall into high, middle, and low ranges. If you're going to test my students, the test should be written by people who have actually taught in public schools. Written at the grade level my students are actually in. Continue no field questions. Score transparently and without manipulation of those scores. If you're going to test my students, they should have a fair chance to obtain the highest score possible. If you're going to compare test scores between nations, it should be a fair comparison. Tell the public which nations that are allegedly ahead of us that don't educate or include the scores of their special needs students. If you're going to base a label of success on myself and my students, you might want to look what happens on the other 174 days of the school year. If the governor wants to have a discussion about the factors of student achievement, he needs to broaden the factors beyond just the classroom teacher. Poverty, attendance, home life, parenting values, IQ. Remember IQ? No one talks about IQ anymore. Kindergarten readiness, home reading habits, student choices, and last but not least, the adverse effects of poor governing all need to be in the discussion. Lastly, I want a website for these parents out there to go to besides Engage New York, where a place where parents can get a real, readable, and understandable version of what is happening in our schools. A place where they can read about Pearson, In Bloom, unfunded mandates, inappropriate exile levels, magic formulas, and second grade teachers asking sixth grade teachers for teaching materials. In closing, do me a favor. Do yourself a favor. Don't take my word for what's happening in our schools. And if you don't want to, please don't take Commissioner King's word for it either. Visit other websites other than Engage New York. Do your own reading. Do your own research. Get informed, get involved, and make your voices heard in Albany and Washington. Stand up for our kids and make sure they get a fair shake. I'll leave you with a quote from President Kennedy as we remember him this week. The men who create power make an indispensable contribution to the nation's greatness, but the men who question power make a contribution just as indispensable, especially when that questioning is disinterested, for they determine whether we use power or power uses us. Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, the panel has been awesome, and we did take a lot of bullets out of my gun, so I'll try and paraphrase and not take up too much more time here. It touched upon a lot of great points. My name is Jim Graham. I'm a teacher and I'm a resident of the Phoenix School District. And where I teach, it's a terrific place to teach. It's different than anything else you've seen. It's an alternative high school here in the area. I recommend anybody that will see it as a big picture school. Teaching alternative high school that utilizes project-based learning, this allows for humor, curiosity, creativity, willingness, determination, innocence, and a love of life. My young learners have a way of inspiring, challenging, and teaching each other while I simultaneously teach them to love learning, the skills to move forward and to be proud of who they are. This is what I picture for my children when they enter school. At Phoenix Central Schools, with the curriculum, they're not getting this. They're not getting inspired. They're getting worksheets. They're getting a diatribe. They're getting a mantra. They're not becoming lifelong learners. They're just getting answers. They're not learning how to find answers. The answers are already out there. Like the man we talked before from the business side of things. He said, we don't have people that think for themselves. And that's what we teach in our school. Please, I beg of you, come see our school, what we do, the high-risk population that we have. And I can tell you the stories in private of what these students go through. You'd be amazed at what they're accomplishing. With that in mind, you can go over the common core facts over and over again. But what is happening here is its business. It's the privatization of our schools. It's the seeing our children as an economic gain for somebody else. And that will never, ever work in education. It's a people-first industry, and that's the way it's got to stay. With these people that are coming from industry, the Gateses, the Pearsons, it's not going to work. We're going to lose a generation. I see it in the children. My daughter's in 3rd grade. I see her friends who might be average and love school, now they hate school. That's horrible. That's terrible. We're losing them. They tell me, I'm not smart anymore, Mr. Grant. I thought I have to let them know that they are. It's damaging. It's no good. It's taking the power the teacher has to inspire and create lifelong learners. And that's a horrible thing. And I hope that we do something soon to change this. Thank you.
Start with questions down to the left side.
Well, thank you, first of all, for this panel, for all your passion and comments. We appreciate you and the thousands you represent who are in the classrooms each day. I do think one of the things that I would just like to highlight, Phil, when you first mentioned how decisions are made and who's making them, I do think one of the issues in the educational structure of New York State that's different from a lot of the other political decisions that are vetted is that most decisions, government is slow sometimes, and we have 2 houses of the legislature and we have an executive, and most things are proposed by the executive, vetted in the Assembly and Senate with different views, or things may generate out of the legislature. And then hopefully that takes a while to kind of mash that with people giving input from different directions, and then decisions are made and we go forward. In the area of choosing our Board of Regents, it's a different process. We have regional representatives and then some at-large representatives. And those people are chosen not proposed by the governor. The governor actually has no role. It's by a joint session of the state legislature. And so a majority of state legislators choose who those Board of Regents are going to be. In the New York State Assembly, at the present time, there are 107 members of the majority party. There are 150 members in the Assembly. There's 63 senators, that's 213. Half of the teachers, hopefully my math, you can double check it. 107 of those members are in the majority party in the New York State Assembly. That, or very near that process, has been the case for the last 20 years. Every member who is on the Board of Regents has either been chosen by or at a minimum vetted by, if not recommended, by the Speaker of the New York State Assembly and the majority party in the New York State Assembly. The process then, for every member and the policies that are coming from the Board of Regents, go through that process and those members go through there. Some people have suggested, New York State Senate perhaps among them, where at some point the majority has been in a different party, a different perspective, has suggested maybe there shouldn't be a joint minority or majority vote of the 2 houses of the legislature, but a different process. It's also perhaps made the executive of the state who can propose funding for education, but can't propose process. It's also made the governor perhaps then come at other initiatives, and so you've seen some fairly strong things from this governor, which I think some of us might argue of whether that was all sound policy and whatever. But I think I just wanted to make that decision because it is a problem, I think, of how education policy is made in the state is not in the normal way that some of the other policies done in the state. And so as we look at where we forces, none of us are fit into that category. We appreciate you making those comments, but we are a part of the legislature, obviously, but we weren't the ones who vetted or necessarily approved those folks. So I just thought I would take a minute to do that.
In the end, thank you very much for testifying.